Alright guys, welcome back to the channel. For today's video, we're going to be talking about this police-involved shooting that occurred in Columbus, Ohio on November the 20th, 2024. You're looking at some stills of the video right here behind you. You can watch the entire video on Police Activities YouTube channel. They do a great job putting out all police-involved shootings across the country, or at least to my knowledge, damn near every police-involved shooting across the country. And that's where we got the footage for today. This was an incident where Columbus police SWAT officers were tracking down a homicide suspect. The guy on the screen right here who's holding a weapon in his right hand there, he was a 16-year-old kid that was accused of murdering someone when he was breaking into that person's vehicle earlier in the day. It was about 6 in the morning, I believe. He was breaking into cars. The vehicle owner came out to his car to see what was going on. This kid shot and killed him. Somehow, officers found some evidence at the scene that linked this guy to it. They sent SWAT officers out after him. They tracked him down to this particular location. I saw this video, or clips of this video, on Instagram, and some of the comments on it were kind of troubling to me, because there's a lot of people that claim to even be police officers that said this was not a justified shooting. This is a shooting where you had a 16-year-old kid who was carrying a gun. He ran from the police. The police then began shooting at him. They shot him multiple times in the back. At one point in time, while they were shooting at him, he actually drops his firearm, continues to run, and the officers continue to shoot at him. There's a lot of people that were confused, thinking that, well, once he dropped the gun, you have to stop shooting at him. That's how we're trained to do it. That's what people were saying. That's actually not true. What those people are saying is not true. That's not how police officers are trained. And we're going to go over exactly why that is here in just a minute. That's the main purpose of this video. I'm seeing a lot of things in the public, not just in YouTube comments, but also, unfortunately, in use of force cases where the general public doesn't understand basic use of force principles and the case law that officers use to dictate their actions when they're confronted with a situation like this. So I think the best thing to do, just so everybody is on the same page, let's go ahead and watch the video that I'm talking about, and then I'm going to come back and we're going to give a little bit of case law and a little bit of discussion on why the officers did what they did and why their actions were in fact justified. Alrighty, so there you have it. It's very short. It's only about 40 seconds of video that I showed you there. This is what happened. Now, we already saw what happened. I already talked about what happened. Let's talk about the two major Supreme Court cases, or the precedent that was set in order to dictate the officer's actions in a scenario like this. So just a quick recap. The officers were attempting to do a traffic stop. They're trying to pin him in probably somewhere safely away from the public so that if there was a shooting, the public would not have been endangered. Unfortunately, this guy pulled into an apartment complex and they're forced to act. Oh, I've got this video up. Sorry, I'm looking at a different picture than what you were looking at here. He pulled into a parking spot. He jumped out of the passenger side because he thought that the only officer that was behind him was on his left side. Unfortunately for him, he got out and he sees this big SWAT officer standing over there. He realizes he can't go that way. So he turns and runs in front of the canine officer, who observed this firearm in his hand right here, and decided that it's now time to start using deadly force. Why did the officer decide now was the time to start using deadly force? Well, that's the part where you have to remember use of force principles that were taught during Graham versus Connor. I've covered Graham versus Connor at length on the channel before, but basically this is the Supreme Court case that tells officers when they can use deadly force to stop a fleeing suspect. And it comes basically down to a two-pronged test. The first thing is officers must have probable cause to believe the suspect poses a significant threat of death or serious physical harm to the officer or others. And I chose the wrong wordage for this. Instead of saying for others, I should have said to the public at large, because that is also the way this is often quoted. So the person must pose a significant risk to the officers or to the public at large. This is a major part that people tend to forget when they're talking about these use of force cases. They'll say, okay, he was just a kid. He was running with a firearm. Running with a firearm is not a crime. He never pointed at the officer. The officer shot him in the back. He needs to go to prison. Well, the part that they're forgetting is that the officer has probable cause or has a serious reason to believe this kid is a danger to the public. This kid was breaking into cars at 6 in the morning when the vehicle owner came out to confront him. He shot and killed that guy. This kid has been on the run for 12 or 14 hours. He's still carrying a firearm. That would cause a reasonable officer to believe he still poses a significant risk of serious physical harm or death to the public. Therefore, that's the first prong of the test. The second prong of the test is the use of deadly force must be necessary to prevent the suspect's escape. This is saying that, you can't stop this guy by any other means. Now, when somebody has already committed a murder, has a firearm in their hand, there's no safe way to apprehend that person. You're not going to use a taser on that person, because if the taser fails, you might die. Or if the taser fails, they might get away. You're also not going to go up and try to tackle that person because they have a gun. You're not going to tackle someone that's armed with a gun because, again, you might die. Therefore, as a murderer fleeing with a firearm in his hand, those are the two prongs of the test. Deadly force is necessary to prevent his escape. It's necessary to use deadly force to stop him so he can't go out and use his firearm against somebody else. Now, here's another part that has a lot of people confused. If you look at the screenshot I have on your page right now, this is actually an image of the guy dropping the gun. The gun was on the ground. Officers continued to chase after him and continued to shoot at him. Now, what's going on in those officers' mind at the time, and what does the Supreme Court have to say about it? The officers already decided, Tennessee versus Gardner, he poses a threat to the public, and I need to use deadly force to stop him. So what do? They start aiming down their sights. They decide it's time to start using deadly force. I'm going to aim in on him. I'm going to start shooting at him, and I'm going to shoot at him until I no longer believe he is a threat. When you're aiming down your sights, what are you looking at? Are you looking at his hands as he's running? Are you trying to shoot the gun out of his hand or something like that? No, you're aiming center mass in the small of his back. You're aiming at a target about this big. When you're aiming at someone in center mass, one thing that you can't see is what's going on with their hands. You're aiming at center mass, and you're going to continue to fire at center mass until that person is no longer a threat. That person might do something. He might pitch a gun. He might do this, that, and the other thing. You can't see that, and the court realizes that, and they don't expect you to be able to see that. And that's the next part that we're going to talk about. And this is the other landmark case that officers use when determining whether or not they can use force and what level of force they're going to use, and how the court evaluates that use of force. This is taken from Graham versus Connor, the other major landmark case when it comes to using force for police officers. It says officers are often forced to make split-second decisions in tense, uncertain, and rapidly changing situations. The part that I want to, I mean, everything in this sentence is actually very good, because split-second decisions, meaning I have to make a determination very quickly if I'm going to use force, because action beats reaction. If that person is going to turn and fire on me, I need to be able to make my decision before they do so. A tense, uncertain situation. This is where you have to remember the natural things that happen to the human body in these situations. You start to get tunnel vision. The world around you starts to get dark. You're focused in on the thing that you need to focus in order to preserve your life, health, and safety, and the safety of others. And then it's a rapidly changing situation. Often, the situation will change faster than your brain is able to make that connection because of the amount of stress that you're under. So if you're chasing after a suspect and you're aimed in on the center of their back and you start to pull your trigger, you're firing that trigger until that person stops moving, because only then are they no longer a threat. You're completely unaware of some of the other things that are going on around you, whether it's a toy gun, a fake gun, he drops the gun, he doesn't drop the gun. The best way for a suspect or a person to prevent this kind of serious level use of force would simply be to put his hands up and stop. or never get out of the car and run with a gun in the first place. But once you do, you're putting into motion a series of events that are outside of anybody's control at that point in time, and the Supreme Court realizes that. So when people get all bent out of shape saying, oh, you know what, he dropped the gun at that point in time, he was no longer a threat to the officers, threat to the public, you know, therefore this is an illegal shooting. Well, you're wrong, because you're not taking into account all of the things that the Supreme Court has already said we're supposed to take into account. One of the other main factors from Graham versus Connor, or one of the Graham factors, is that you have to look at it from the perspective of the officer that is on the ground, and without the benefit of 20/20 hindsight. When we're doing this, and I'll play the video for you in the background here, we're able to watch the video over and over and over again. We're able to play it in slow motion. You also have to remember that this officer's body camera is mounted below, is below his line of sight. It's below his line of sight, and also the camera picks up a lot more than what the officer's eyes are picking up. If the officer's head is turned a certain direction, or I have guns over here, but I'm not going to point at the camera today. If the officer happens to be looking down his sights, what is he focused on? Like, I'm basically only able to see the lens of my camera right now. That's the only thing that I'm focused on, because that is what is most important to me. If there's something happening in my periphery, I might see some motion, but I can't tell you exactly what's going on. I can't tell you how many fingers are on each hand, and I'm not expected to, because I am facing down a deadly threat. That's what the Supreme Court has to say about these things. And that's what the public needs to understand when they're evaluating these kinds of situations. I think that's it for me today, guys. Thank you for watching. I'll talk to you later.